Welcome to today's deep dive into a group of animals you've probably never seen in person, but they're among the most beautiful and mysterious creatures in the ocean. Today, we're talking about comb jellies, also known as ctenophores, and their surprising place in the tree of life. From the dark depths of the open sea to coastal shallows, these gelatinous animals drift through the water with rows of shimmering cilia beating in perfect coordination like rainbow-tinted combs. But behind their graceful appearance lies a scientific controversy that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about how animals evolved. If you'd like to learn more, check out the document in the description with research papers and image credits. At first glance, a comb jelly might look like a jellyfish, translucent, gelatinous, and ghostly. But despite the resemblance, they aren't jellyfish at all. Comb jellies belong to their own phylum, Ctenophora, and they do things very differently. For one, they don't sting. Unlike jellyfish, which use stinging cells to catch prey, comb jellies use sticky tentacles, or in some cases lobes of their body, to snare food. And instead of swimming by pulsing, they glide through the water using rows of tiny, hair-like structures called cilia. In comb jellies, these are fused together into paddle-like structures called tenes, which beat in perfect waves, scattering light into iridescent rainbows. It's not bioluminescence, it's diffraction, but the effect is mesmerizing. Most comb jellies are small, no bigger than a grape, but some species can grow longer than your arm. Some drift passively, others actively hunt. And for all their delicate appearance, many are surprisingly aggressive predators, capable of engulfing prey nearly half their own size. In terms of body plan, comb jellies are strange. Their bodies are mostly water, supported by a jelly-like layer called a mesoglea. They have no brain, but they do have a nerve net and a sensory organ that helps them stay oriented. Their symmetry is unusual too. Most animals are either bilateral, like humans, meaning you can draw a line down the middle and get two mirrored halves, or radial, like jellyfish, where the body is arranged like spokes on a wheel. Comb jellies fall somewhere in between, often described as biradial. It's just one more way they defy categorization. And unlike most early diverging animals, ctenophores have something remarkable, a through gut, a mouth at one end and an anal pore at the other. That might not sound impressive, but in evolutionary terms it's a big deal. A one-way digestive system is a major innovation in animal evolution, and exactly when it evolved is still debated. So, no stingers, no brain, shimmering cilia, and possibly one of the earliest complete guts. Comb jellies are dazzling and deeply strange. And that strangeness becomes even more intriguing when we ask a bigger question. Where exactly do they fit into the tree of life? To understand just how strange comb jellies really are, we need to zoom out and look at where they sit on the broader animal family tree. All animals, from insects to elephants, share a common ancestor. To figure out what that ancestor was like, scientists turn to some of the simplest animals alive today, such as sponges and placozoans. Sponges lack muscles, nerves, and organs, while placozoans are tiny, flat, amoeba-like creatures. Both seemed like logical candidates for the earliest branch of the animal tree. Comb jellies, by contrast, have muscles, nerves, and a through gut. So, for a long time, it was assumed that they must have evolved after simpler animals like sponges. But then came the genomic studies. When researchers began comparing full genomes, they got a shock. Some analyses placed ctenophores as the earliest diverging animal lineage, branching off even before sponges. This is known as the Ctenophore first hypothesis, and it sparked one of the biggest debates in evolutionary biology. If comb jellies really were first, that would mean that complex traits like nerves and muscles either evolved twice, once in ctenophores and again in other animals, or that they evolved early and were lost in groups like sponges and placozoans. Either option is controversial. Re-evolving complexity seems unlikely, but so does losing it entirely. Supporters of the traditional view, Porifera first, argue that sponges' simplicity makes them a better model for early animals, and depending on the methods and assumptions used, some studies do support that view. But others, including some of the largest and most comprehensive genomic comparisons to date, still place comb jellies as the earliest branch. So where does that leave us? Right now, there's no consensus. The root of the animal tree remains one of the biggest open questions in biology. But regardless of who came first, one thing is clear: comb jellies have followed a very different evolutionary path. Whether they're a glimpse of early complexity or an ancient parallel experiment, they offer clues to the origins of animals themselves. Now, to make all of that a little more concrete, let's walk through a simplified version of the animal family tree. We'll follow the Ctenophore first hypothesis here, which, while debated, is helpful for visualizing just how deep the split may go. At the very base of the tree, we find the comb jellies or ctenophores. We've already talked about some of their unique biology, and we'll explore more as the video goes on. But phylogenetically, it is their early split from other animal groups that makes them remarkable. So what are they most closely related to? Well, if the tree is correct, the short answer is everything and nothing. All other animals are more closely related to each other than any of them are to the comb jellies. Or, to put it another way, all other animals are equally related to ctenophores. That alone gives you a sense of how distinct the evolutionary path may have been. Next are the sponges, Porifera. These filter feeders don't have nerves or muscles, the very fact that has led to the phylogenetic controversy. Either way, both groups seem to represent very ancient and very different evolutionary paths. Then come the placozoans, a strange and often overlooked group. They're flat, free-living animals that glide across surfaces using cilia. They have no organs, no symmetry, and only a few different cell types. Yet they share genes and molecular machinery with more complex animals. After that, we find the cnidarians, jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones. These animals are famous for their stinging cells, radial symmetry, and simple nervous systems. Compared to sponges or placozoans, cnidarians are clearly more complex, and they're often used as models to study the origins of things like muscles and nerve nets. Finally, we reach Bilateria, the branch that includes the majority of animals, including worms, insects, and vertebrates. They have bilateral symmetry, 3 tissue layers, and usually a through gut. So when you look at this tree, comb jellies don't just stand out, they stand apart. Their anatomy, development, and possibly even their nervous systems reflect a branch of animal evolution unlike anything else. Comb jellies might look like jellyfish at a glance, but once you look closer, that illusion vanishes. They don't sting, they don't pulse, and their anatomy is a blueprint all their own. Let's start with their movement, one of the most beautiful things you can see in the ocean. Ctenophores get their name from the 8 rows of fused cilia along their bodies, called tenes or comb rows, that beat in coordinated waves, propelling them through the water. They're the largest animals to move using cilia, and when light hits these tenes, it scatters into shimmering rainbows. It's not bioluminescence, though some species can glow. It's diffraction, like a living prism. Then there's how they feed. Many ctenophores use sticky cells called colloblasts, structures unique to comb jellies, to capture plankton and other small prey. Some species have long and trailing tentacles, while others use lobes or oral arms to scoop food toward the mouth. Internally, their digestive system is more advanced than you might expect. Food enters the mouth, is digested in a central cavity, and in many species exits through anal pores. That might sound basic, but it's not something every animal has. Sponges, for example, don't have a through gut at all. But perhaps the most startling feature of comb jellies is their nervous system. They don't have a centralized brain, but they do have a nerve net. And in some species, it coordinates behavior in surprisingly sophisticated ways. In fact, some researchers argue that ctenophores have a nervous system that evolved independently from all other animals. Their neurons use different genes, different building blocks, and even different kinds of synapses, the connections between nerve cells, from all other animals. It's as if evolution reinvented the nervous system from scratch. And yet they glide, hunt, and respond to the world with eerie precision. Despite their ghostly forms, some are among the most voracious predators in the sea, capable of decimating plankton populations when introduced to new habitats. Long-time viewers of my channel will know I like to lay things out nice and neatly in a phylogeny. Which species or groups are most closely related, which are more distantly connected. I find it's a helpful way to structure a discussion, following the branches of the family tree. But when I sat down to do this with the comb jellies, I quickly realised it was going to be much more difficult. Because, honestly, our understanding of their family tree is still a bit of a mess. Traditionally, it was relatively straightforward, which should probably have been the first red flag. In biology, things are rarely straightforward. For a long time, comb jellies were grouped into two classes: Tentaculata, those with tentacles, and Nuda, those without. Tentaculata included most species, more than 85%, spread across 8 recognised orders. Nuda, by contrast, had just one order. Then came molecular testing, and, as it so often does, it threw a spanner in the works. DNA evidence forced researchers to rethink the entire evolutionary tree. It turns out that Nuda, the group without tentacles, didn't start that way. They lost their tentacles secondarily and are nested deep within the tentacled group. Other orders turned out to be polyphyletic, grouping animals together that exclude closer relatives. And for some of the newer or more obscure orders, we still don't really know where they fit at all. So let's just say the comb jelly phylogeny is still very much a work in progress. Researchers are working hard to piece it together, and every year we get a slightly clearer view of how the various parts fit. But for now, it's a puzzle where the edges are blurry, some of the pieces are missing, and a few don't even look like they belong to the same set. With that said, let's get into the different groups, following a phylogeny as best we can. We'll start with the order Cydippida, though that comes with a caveat. This group is almost certainly polyphyletic, meaning it doesn't represent a single evolutionary lineage. So it's more accurate to say we're starting with some of what's currently placed in Cydippida. Within that, one clade stands out as potentially the most ancient branch of all living comb jellies, and one of the oldest surviving animal lineages on Earth. Fossils resembling these forms date back to the Cambrian, and their true origins may stretch even further into the Precambrian seas. This lineage includes two key families, Euplocammidae and Mertensiidae. Euplocammidae are known for their distinctive hunting and movement techniques. Like most comb jellies, their tentacles are covered in sticky colloblasts. But these animals are equipped with a remarkable spring-loaded mechanism. When prey touches a tentacle, the tentilla coil inward rapidly, snapping the prey inward toward the mouth in a fast, mechanical motion. They're also agile swimmers. Some species can reverse the beat of their cilia using neural signals, allowing them to dart backwards, an escape response not seen in most other ctenophores. They have an organ to maintain balance and orient themselves in the water column, but under threat, they appear able to override this system, sacrificing stability for speed. Mertensiidae, on the other hand, are adapted for deep sea life. They typically have more delicate, translucent bodies adapted for drifting in cold, dark waters. Their large oral lobes form a kind of funnel that guides prey into the mouth, and in some species, bioluminescent pulses light up the water when they are disturbed, an airy and beautiful defense. We will return to other lineages of Cydippida shortly, but the next branch on our phylogeny is Platyctenida, the benthic comb jellies. While most comb jellies drift or swim in the water column, this group made the leap to a benthic lifestyle, living on the seafloor. To survive in this new environment, platyctenids have transformed in dramatic ways. Their bodies are flattened for creeping along surfaces, and many species have lost their iconic comb rows entirely, the very feature that gives the phylum their name. In some, the cilia used for swimming are also reduced or missing, replaced with a powerful muscular pharynx that acts like a foot, letting them crawl rather than float. Some platyctenids have even evolved camouflage to blend in with corals, sea stars, and tunicates, often living directly on these other animals. They're stealthy, sometimes nearly invisible, perfectly matching the surfaces they live on. But this lifestyle shift also comes with some unique reproductive strategies. Reproduction is something we haven't touched on yet with comb jellies, but most are hermaphrodites, releasing both eggs and sperm into the water for external fertilization. Benthic comb jellies, on the other hand, often reproduce asexually. Depending on the species, this may involve fission, where the animal splits into two or more parts that regenerate into full individuals, or budding, where a small clone grows on the parent's body and eventually detaches. These methods help them rapidly colonize a favorable patch of reef or sea floor without needing to find a mate. Yet, many can reproduce sexually too. Some species even brood their young, holding fertilized embryos inside their bodies until they're more developed. This kind of internal brooding offers protection to vulnerable young in the predator-rich benthic environment and shows a surprising level of parental involvement for a gelatinous invertebrate. And what's especially fascinating is that their larvae don't resemble adults at all. When they first hatch, Platyctenid larvae look like free-swimming Cydippid's, complete with comb rows. Only after settling on a surface do they transform into their adult bottom-dwelling forms. Let's return to Cydippida with the family Pleurobrachiidae. This is not the only other family grouped under Cydippida, but the others are either poorly studied or represented by just a handful of species. So this will be our last stop in the group. While the rest of the order is a taxonomic mess, Pleurobrachiids are relatively well studied, and they also happen to include some of the most familiar comb jellies out there. If you've visited a public aquarium and seen a small, glowing, orb-shaped jelly with trailing tentacles, chances are it was a Pleurobrachia, a genus nicknamed the sea gooseberries. These tiny predators are deceptively simple looking. At first glance, they seem like gelatinous beads, lit up by the refracted light from their moving cilia. But look closer and you'll see a sophisticated hunter. They have two long, retractable tentacles lined with sticky colloblasts, which drag behind them like fishing lines. When these filaments snag small crustaceans or plankton, they use rhythmic muscle contractions to reel the prey in, directing it toward the mouth nestled between the tentacle bases. Despite lacking a centralized brain, Pleurobrachiids have a complex nerve net and a balance organ called a statocyst, which helps them stay oriented as they swim. This coordination is especially important for their signature spiraling swimming motion, known for being elegant and hypnotic. They're also remarkably adaptable. Some species stay tiny, just a few millimeters across, while others can grow several centimeters. And while many are transparent in the open ocean, individuals living in murkier or shallower waters may develop a more pigmented appearance, presumably for camouflage. And just like many of their relatives, Pleurobrachiids are hermaphrodites, usually reproducing by external fertilization. But some species can also briefly brood their eggs internally, adding yet another layer of reproductive diversity to this already versatile group. Thanks to their wide distribution, ease of care, and transparent bodies, species like Pleurobrachia pileus have become model organisms in marine research. Scientists have been studying them in European labs for centuries, especially to understand how early nervous systems evolved and how movement is coordinated in ancient animal lineages. Next, we come to one of the more distinctive and intimidating groups of comb jellies, the Beroida. These ctenophores are instantly recognizable by their lack of tentacles and their torpedo-like shape. If you've ever seen what looks like a translucent rugby ball drifting ominously through the ocean, that's probably a Beroid. Beroids are large, muscular comb jellies that no longer use tentacles. This might seem surprising, given how central tentacles are to how most comb jellies feed. But Beroids have taken a very different path, and it is their hunting strategy that really sets them apart. Rather than capturing plankton or detritus with sticky colloblasts, they are active predators of other ctenophores, and they can take down prey larger than themselves. To do this, they've evolved a highly extendable mouth that can gape open to swallow entire animals. When not in use, this mouth is sealed almost invisibly by a ring of adhesive seals. Inside, muscular folds and bands of cilia help grip and crush prey before it's digested. In many ways, Beroids are like living stomachs, fast, efficient, and highly adapted for consuming gelatinous prey. They move quickly with their comb rows and likely detect their quarry by sensing vibrations or chemical cues in the water. For a long time, Beroida was classified in its own class, Nuda, based on the assumption that lacking tentacles was a primitive trait. But as we've discussed earlier in this video, DNA evidence overturned that view. We now know that Beroida is deeply nestled within the tentacled lineages, and the tentacle-free form is a derived trait, not a primitive one. They lost their tentacles secondarily as part of a broader evolutionary shift towards active predation. So, far from being a primitive throwback, Beroida are highly specialized and highly successful predators of the open ocean. Now we come to a loosely related set of groups that all moved away from the classic Cydippid form, each in their own strange and fascinating direction. These include Lobata, Cestida, and Thalassocalycida. They often appear close together in molecular studies, but exactly how they're related is still debated. Let's start with Lobata. These comb jellies are flattened and have evolved a pair of large wing-like lobes that extend from the body. These lobes funnel plankton into the mouth and are often paired with short oral arms, often fringed with tentacles or tentacle-like structures to capture prey. One infamous member of this group is Nemiopsis leirdii, a species that went from relatively obscure to making headlines after its accidental introduction to the Black Sea in the 1980s. In its new home, it multiplied explosively, thanks in part to its ability to self-fertilize and produce thousands of offspring in just days. It quickly decimated local zooplankton and fish populations, wreaking havoc on the ecosystem. To try and restore balance, scientists looked to another comb jelly, Beroida, a species of Beroida. As we've discussed, a group specialized to prey on other comb jellies. When Beroida arrived in the region, likely unintentionally, in the late 1990s, it began preying on the invasive comb jelly almost immediately. This helped curb Nemiopsis populations and partially restored ecological balance. While not without controversy, it's one of the few examples where ctenophores have played a starring role in environmental intervention, and a powerful reminder of how impactful these animals can be in marine food webs. If Lobata gave us wing-like lobes, Cestida takes that body shape and stretches it to the extreme. These are the ribbon comb jellies, long, thin, and almost flat, with some species growing over a metre long but just a few millimetres thick. The most famous example is Cestum veneris, or the Venus girdle. It glides through the water with undulating waves and beating cilia, resembling a living strip of gelatine. Like Lobata, ribbon comb jellies still have oral lobes and tentacles, but these are reduced and stretched out to fit its streamlined shape. Cestids are perfectly adapted for slow, efficient cruising through deep ocean water. And then there's the Thalassocalycida, one of the strangest and least understood comb jellies known. This group includes just one described species, Thalassocalyce inconstans. Rather than using lobes or tentacles, Thalassocalyce looks like a delicate, translucent umbrella. It hovers motionless in the water, then contracts suddenly to trap plankton inside its bell-shaped body. It's a passive hunting method, similar to a Venus flytrap or certain jellyfish, but it works well in the deep ocean. There's still debate over where exactly Thalassocalyce fits in the ctenophore tree. Some place it within Lobata, others argue it's distinct enough to stand alone. And given how rarely it's seen, it's entirely possible there are related species out there waiting to be discovered. To wrap up our tour, we come to two of the most mysterious branches of the comb jelly lineage, Ganeshida and Cryptolobifera. Ganeshida includes deep-sea comb jellies, named after the elephant-headed Hindu deity Ganesha, because their forward-pointing lobes, which flank the mouth and sit atop an elongated pharynx, produce a gentle, symbolic resemblance to an elephant's head. We've only found a handful of specimens, but both its anatomy and gene sequences suggest it doesn't fit into any of the previously described groups, so it's been given its own branch on the tree. Cryptolobifera is even more of an enigma. The order contains two known species, Cryptolobata primitiva, described in 1909, and Lobocrypta animata, described in 1946. Neither species has been observed since their original descriptions, and there are no known photographs, or even scientific illustrations of them. I've scoured the internet and literature and couldn't find a single drawing, so the image on the screen is just the best my AI tools could come up with to visualize what they might look like, based on the few records that do exist. I'm certainly not a fan of generative AI, and I definitely don't trust it to get the image right, but at least it gives me something to show while talking about them. These obscure groups remind us that even in the 21st century, the ocean still holds animals we barely understand. With every new discovery, often from deep or remote habitats, the Ctenophore tree of life continues to grow and shift. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of comb jellies, from the earliest branches of the animal family tree to the deep ocean floors. Ctenophores are some of the most bizarre and inventive animals on Earth. They're early branches of the animal kingdom, yet their biology is anything but primitive. From neural nets to reproductive flexibility to alien-like body parts, comb jellies remind us just how creative evolution can be. So, if this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much we don't know about life in our oceans, and every strange creature we learn about helps us better understand the story of life on Earth. Thanks for watching. If there's another fascinating species you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments below.